Steve.
We'll sit up front.
I appreciate that. I thought about talking, I mean, I'm glad that I'm on
Are
the
you
front and
bearing
not
up?
behind the move. It would feel a little bit,
And it's like, okay,
Yeah.
you're out there, folks.
yes.
I am retired, well, largely retired now, so I'm doing better than I was even a week ago.
Okay, so that's a new thing?
A very new thing.
Oh, wow, okay.
Like 7 days old.
I've always heard it can be difficult at the beginning from,
Not difficult.
No,
yet.
okay, nice,
Matter of fact, I
okay.
even had a return visit, a follow-up visit with my doctor this afternoon. Said, your blood pressure's great.
It's like, yes.
I think there's some connection.
yeah.
Retirement, yeah, could be that.
Good, well, I'm glad it's had an immediate benefit.
Yeah, I don't wake
Well,
up in the
it-
middle,
it
well,
was-
when I wake up in the middle of the night, I don't go back to bed lying, and lie awake thinking about 1,000
It was,
things
it was
for
up to
work.
last Friday in the hundreds of files he had to go through one
No,
by
no, no,
one.
thousands.
Thousands, excuse me.
Hundreds of thousands.
No, not
Could have
hundreds
been
of thousands, but
boxes and
thousands,
boxes of files from 45 years of his practice.
including some temple files I found.
Yeah, we did.
From the 90s.
So that was very
One
nice.
of my partners to look at the temple's insurance coverage. and Let me know if you thought there was something missing. And the files never left the office, so well, now they have.
Well, congratulations on that. Thanks for setting up earlier, like bringing the food and
Getting
whatnot.
your stuff, yeah.
Yeah, Mona won't be here tonight.
Oh,
She had a family emergency.
okay, well then I can,
Yeah, I didn't want to volunteer you, but
No,
if you
but
wanted
that's great,
to
sure.
put the water out or take
Yeah.
the plastic off or whatnot.
you got it.
Hey, how's it going? Good.
How you doing?
I'm good.
Been a while.
You're taller than me now, aren't you?
No, it's just the shoes.
Yeah.
No, you're tall.
No, I'm not tall.
I know it's me, is it warm in here?
Does it feel warm?
And also, we're all wearing masks,
Mhm.
so we're all,
Now, be careful what you ask for. I can turn it down, but.
I have a
Okay.
jacket.
Okay.
I think it's as much humidity.
It's at 73, I can turn 70. It really just depends. I think we're at a point right now, nothing's on, it's just blowing ambient air, so it feels kind of warm. Once the cooling stage turns on,
Okay,
go
then,
the other way.
right.
So I'll
That's
take
why-
a look at it.
Yeah, that's why at home, we have a fan going in the
Mhm.
ceiling all the time.
Yeah.
Guys, I'm Benny Gustafson.
Any Miles Berman.
Nice to meet you.
Hi, Linda Berman.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Any relation to Michelle?
Yeah, that's my mom.
I love her.
So,
I want her to be a docent,
a docent.
give the tours.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah, she loves doing the
Well,
numbers.
I'm hoping I have a letter, it's gonna go out soon
Sure.
to invite people, because we need people to be available during Friday night services, sometimes Sundays, and weeknights, and some weekdays. So we have a lot to fill.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah. My mom loves the work she does. So.
Catch up a little bit. How
Yeah,
Ben,
so
where are you at right now?
I went to college, so I graduated in 2021 and went to Marquette University.
Nice.
Yeah.
Majors.
Oh,
That's
please,
like a
thank you.
Catholic school.
Sure,
They
okay.
were like not like Catholicism, but yeah, it was tough at first. So I went in doing the biomedical sciences thing, and I got really beat up by biology.
Okay.
And so now, and then I went to Israel.
Okay.
And now I'm kind of switching things up. I'm gonna go to international affairs. And I'm gonna
Okay. You're still at Mark,
Shabbat Shalom. How are you? No, I don't think this one has arms.
Oh.
I don't think so. It does. Your daughter was here last week, I saw.
Yes.
How is she doing?
Great. And we saw her tonight leading to the
Yeah. Does she, I know she's not a solo there, am I correct?
Right, there are 14 clergy.
Oh my gosh, that must be a huge temple.
27 and a waiting list.
Oh my gosh. Oh, you had a waiting list.
Oh, yeah, because she's also.
And you can leave them open.
Lovely little.
That's what he said.
But it's fun.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We'll start just with a nigun, a melody without words to gather us in this space. Yalla la la la, yalla la la la, yalla la 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 la, yalla la la la, yalla la la la, yalla la la la, yalla la la. Try that with me. Yalla la la la, yalla la la, yalla la 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 la. La 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 la. Ya la 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 la, ya 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 la 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 la. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la la la. Ya la 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 la, ya 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 la la la, ya la la la, ya la. Shabbat Shalom again. As many of you may be aware, Rabbi Beich is away this week and will be returning in the week to come. As we gather here in this sacred space, we begin that process of taking account of everything that we're carrying from this last week, of making sure that we have the things and the intentions that we need for this moment, and of setting aside or letting go of those things and intentions that might distract us. If you're here in this room, welcome again. You'll need a Siddur and a Shabbat program, which we have on our table out in the foyer. And if you're joining us online, you can also access the Siddur and the program with links in the video description. We are, by the way, still in this time of year when Jewish communities in Israel and the diaspora are slightly off from one another in their Torah reading cycles, and this congregation following the Israeli calendar. I'm going to be speaking more about the Torah portion later, Parashat Balak, but I mention it now because there is a rather famous quote from this portion spoken by a non-Jewish prophet who was gazing upon a gathering of the people of Israel and proclaimed that gathering to be good. And so I will join together on page 630, where we find the words of Matovu. How good are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling places, O Israel. How good is this place where we are right now, where we can be in community and nourish our spirits with prayer and song. We'll offer the refrain and then the third verse, which starts with the words of Ani tefilati lecha, often translated, and let my prayer come to you at a favorable time, but that can also be interpreted as, and let me be my prayer to you at a favorable time. Page 630. 630, Matovu. Matovu, ohalecha Yaakov, ohalecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael. Matovu, ohalecha Yaakov, ohalecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael. Third verse. Va'ani tefilati lecha Adonai et ratzon Elohim v'rov chasdecha Haneni ve'emet ishecha Matovu ohalecha Yaakov ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael Matovu ohalecha Yaakov ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. We will kindle lights to welcome the Sabbath together, joining back on page 120. I'm wondering if anyone would be willing to be put on the spot to help with lighting our Shabbat candles. I'm seeing a possibility. If I could invite, we have a number of guests in our congregation today, but I wonder if I could invite David and Corey to come up and light our Shabbat candles. Hello. Hello, hello.
Can you do this every other one? Okay. Blessed is the match consumed in kindling flame.
Blessed is the flame that burns in the secret fastness of the heart.
Blessed are the hearts with strength to stop their beating for honor's sake.
Blessed is the match consumed in kindling flame.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ושנו במצוותיו וציוונו להדליק נר, להדליק נר של Shabbat. Thank you, friends. In a moment, we'll be continuing with Kabbalat Shabbat on page 136 with Psalm 29. Incidentally, there are many Jewish communities, particularly some Sephardi communities and in the Syrian Jewish community, who begin their Kabbalat Shabbat with Psalm 29. Psalm 29 evokes the presence of God in the middle of a thunderstorm, filling us with awe at the wonder of creation. And yet it also then concludes with a moment of great calm and wholeness, asking God to bless us with strength and peace. We too may be entering from a week full of noise, some of it wondrous, some of it calamitous, yearning for a moment of peace and quiet. May our words of Kabbalat Shabbat, of receiving Shabbat, help us to make space for that peace, to renew our strength, and to receive what Shabbat can offer us. We're going to use that melody of that nigun that we sang at the beginning of the service. And we'll take it slow-ish. You'll pick up on it. Mizmor leDavid, Havu l'Adonai b'nei Elim, Havu l'Adonai kavod va'oz, Havu l'Adonai kavod shemo, Ishtachavu l'Adonai behadrat kodesh, Kol Adonai al hamayim, El hakavod hirim, Adonai al mayim rabim, Kol Adonai ba'koach, Kol Adonai behadar, Kol Adonai shover arazim, Vaishaver Adonai et arzei halvanon, Vayarkidem kemo egel Levanon v'Sirion, Levanon v'Sirion, kemo ven re'emim, Kol Adonai chotzev lavot eish, Kol Adonai yachil midbar, Yachil Adonai midbar kadesh, Kol Adonai yicholel ayalot, Vayechesov ye'arot, Uveheichalo kulo omer kavod, Adonai lamabul yashav, Vayeshev Adonai melech le'olam, Adonai oz le'amo yitein, Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom. We'll continue with Lecha Dodi on page 138. Singing verses 1, 2, 5, and 9. Lecha dodi likrat kala yadalai 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 pnei Shabbat mekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala yadalai 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 pnei Shabbat mekabela. Shamor v'zachor b'ribur echad, Ishmiyanu el hameyuchad, Adonai echad, Ushmo echad, שם ולתפארת ולתהילה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, ידני, 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 בני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, ידני, 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 בני שבת נקבלה. לקראת שבת לכו ונלכה, כי היא מקור הברכה. מראש מקדם נסוכה, סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, ידני, 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 בני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, ידני, 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 בני שבת נקבלה. התעוררי, התעוררי, כי באורך קומי אורי. אורי, אורי, שיר דברי, כבוד אדוני עלייך נגלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, ידני, 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 בני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, ידני, 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 בני שבת נקבלה. בואי ושלום, עטרת בעלה, גם בשמחה ובצולה, תוך אמוני עם סגולה. בואי חלה, בואי חלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, ידני, 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 בני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, ידני, 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 בני שבת נקבלה. Continue on the next page. From Psalm 92, Tzadik Katamar Yifrach. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, צדיק תמר יפרח, כארז בלבנון יזכה, שתולים בבית אדוני, בחצרות אלוהינו יפריחו, עוד ינובון בשיבה, דשנים ורעננים יהיו להגיד, כי ישר אדוני צורי ולא עוולתה בו. We turn to page 146, and we rise as we are able for Ma'ariv. Baruch hu et Adonai hamevorach. Baruch Adonai hamevorach leolam va'ed. We continue together, reading together in the English on page 148 in the middle. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, ruler of the universe, who speaks the evening into being, skillfully opens the gates, thoughtfully alters the time and changes the seasons, and arranges the stars in their heavenly courses according to plan. You are creator of day and night. From darkness and darkness from light, transforming day into night and distinguishing one from the other. Adonai Tsevaot is your name. Ever-living God, may you reign continually over us into eternity. Blessed are you, Adonai, who brings on the evening. El Chai v'kayam, tamid yimloch aleinu le'olam va'ed, Baruch atah Adonai, Ha'ma'ariv aravim. We continue on page 150. The tune that is relatively new to this community, but it started, I think, to seep into our bones a little bit. Ahavat olam beit Yisrael, Amcha ahavta, Torah u'mitzvot, chukim u'mishpatim, otanu limadeta. Ahavat olam beit Yisrael, Amcha ahavta, Torah u'mitzvot, chukim u'mishpatim, otanu limadeta. Al kein Adonai Eloheinu, b'shofeinu uvkumeinu, nasiach bechukecha, v'nismach b'divrei toratecha, u'mitzvotecha le'olam va'ed. Ahavat olam, beit Yisrael, Amcha ahavta, Torah u'mitzvot, chukim u'mishpatim, otanu limadeta. Al kein Adonai Eloheinu, v'shofeinu uvkumeinu, nasiach bechukecha, v'nismach b'divrei toratecha, u'mitzvotecha le'olam va'ed. Vihem chayenu ve'orech yameinu, u'bahem negeh yomam v'layla, ve'ahavatecha al tasir mimenu le'olamim. Yalai lai 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 lai, yalai lai lai yada la la lai, yada lai 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 la la lai, yalai lai 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 la lai, yalai lai lai yada la la lai, yalai lai yalai la lai. Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael. Page 152. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. 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 Shem kivod malchuto, le'olam va'ed. You may be seated. And we'll continue on page 154. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol me'odecha ve'hayu hadivarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם אדוני אלוהיכם אמת. I'm on page 157 at the top. Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands and marching together. Page 158. Yai lai, yai lai lai, yai lai 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 lai, yai lai 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 lai, yai lai lai lai, yai lai 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 lai. Micha mocha ba'elim Adonai, Micha mocha Nedar v'kodesh Nora Tehilot Oseh V'leh Nora Tehilot Oseh V'leh Malchutecha ra'u v'necha וכהים לפני משה ומרים זה אלי ענו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד Yai lai, lai lai lai, yai lai 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 lai, yai lai 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 lai, yai lai lai lai, yai lai 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 lai. ונאמר כי פדה אדוני את יעקב וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל. Continue on page 160. If you need, there's also some English that's not in our prayer book, which you should be able to find in our Shabbat program. If you like, actually, you can just pray from there on page 3 of our Shabbat program. Might be a little bit less cumbersome to be switching back and forth. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom, l'shalom, ve'ha'amidenu shomreinu l'chaim, ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha, ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha, Amen. Shelter us beneath thy wings, O Adonai. Guard us from all harmful things, O Adonai. Keep us safe throughout the night, till we wake with morning's light. Teach us, God, wrong from right. Amen. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom, l'shalom, ve'ha'amidenu shomreinu l'chaim, ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha, ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai, haporei sukat shalom aleinu, aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael, ve'al Yerushalayim. Amen. 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 We're going to be approaching the heart of tefillah, the part of tefillah that is also itself called tefillah, a word that means inward looking, literally. Always when we are gathered to pray, we are trying to find that quiet moment. We are trying to find a way to express the inexpressible. I have this striking memory of a quote that was on the wall of the choir room where I went to high school. I do not remember who said it. If anyone knows, you're welcome to tell me afterwards. That after silence, that which comes closest to expressing the inexpressible is music. Our words and our music and our prayers are all toward the goal of trying to help us to find our silence. So we'll offer some more words of our Amidah, of our tefillah, and then in a little moment, in a little while, we'll have a chance to see if we can find that quiet space within us. We'll continue with our tefillah on page 164 and rise as we are able. Adonai sifatai tiftahu fi agi tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. Page 166. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, ve'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor ve'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasarim Tovim, Ve'Konei HaKol, Ve'Zocher Chaste Avot ve'Imahot, Umevi Geula Livnei V'neihem, Le'ma'an Shemo Be'ahava, Melech Ozer Umoshia Umagen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham, Ve'ezrat Sarah. Page 168. Atah Gibor le'olam Adonai, Mechaye hakol atah, Rav lehoshia, Morid hatal, Mechalkel chaim bechesed, Mechaye hakol berachamim rabim, Somech noflim verofei cholim, Umatir asurim, Umekayem emunato, Lishene afar, Micha mocha ba'al gevurot, Umidomelach, Melech meimit umechaye, Umatzmiach Yeshua, V'ne'eman ata lehachayot hakol. Baruch atah Adonai, mechaye hakol. Atah kadosh v'shimcha kadosh, ukdoshim b'chol yom yehallelucha selah. Baruch atah Adonai, ha'el hakadosh. We'll continue quietly, standing or seated as you like. If you're continuing standing, you can sit whenever you're ready, and we'll eventually meet one another on page 180. We'll be joining together on page 180 in a moment, but for now I encourage you to just take a moment and listen to that silence in yourself. And the prayer we hope to offer. ואני תפילתי לך אדוני את רצון. ואני תפילתי לך אדוני את רצון. אלוהים ברוב חסדך הנני באמת ישעך. אלוהים ברוב חסדך הנני באמת ישעך. As for me, let me be my prayer to you, Adonai, will you hear? As for me, let me be my prayer to you, Adonai, will you hear? Let there be kindness and love. Answer me, but not from above. Help me find a way to begin, reaching out and reaching in. Ma tovu, ma tovu, ma tovu, ohalecha Yaakov, ma tovu, ma tovu, ma tovu, mishkenotecha Yisrael, ma tovu, ma tovu, ma tovu, ohalecha Yaakov, ma tovu, ma tovu, ma tovu, mishkenotecha Yisrael. Oh, say shalom, shalom bimromav, yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel. Yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Amen. Oh, say shalom, shalom bimromav. Yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel ve'al kol Yisrael. Amen. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. It is good to be together on this Shabbat, especially after a week like the one we have had. Too many times we have gathered here on Shabbat with a heavy burden of a recent tragedy, especially within the last month. And this time, a horrific incident of gun violence, a mass shooting at the 4th of July parade in Highland Park, has hit rather close to home. Not only do many members of our congregation have connections to that area, we have since learned that the shooter, after carrying out this massacre, fled here to Madison, where he seriously considered harming another Independence Day celebration. It is times like this when it is especially important to be in touch with how we are feeling, to make space for emotions like fear or anger or even despair, to take time to process. And if we name those feelings and reflect on them and connect to others who can validate and support us, it's possible that we still may struggle to find ways to channel those feelings into constructive actions. And yet, I firmly believe that without naming them, without processing our emotional reactions to tragedy, acting constructively is even more difficult, if not impossible. For my own part, I have to tell you that the compounding trauma and tragedy of mass shootings over the last several years, and especially those that have occurred in recent weeks in Buffalo, Uvalde, and Highland Park, leave me with an overwhelming sense of frustration and despair. And these are also only the incidents that have received the greatest degree of news coverage. No matter how one defines a mass shooting, they are clearly on the rise in our country. A steady drumbeat of these horrific events, many of which seem to fade from the headlines in days, too frequent, too dismal, too commonplace to absorb. Sometimes it takes all of my willpower to respond to that latest mass shooting, wherever it may be, with anything but numbness. And that doesn't even touch all of the other ways that gun violence plagues our country. But the cyclical nature of mass shootings, the insufficient response of those with power and influence, feels inescapable. For anyone who is engaged with or affected by this issue, there is a great risk of resigning ourselves to the inevitability of this cycle, of underestimating our own power and agency, of accepting despair, numbness, or disengagement as our only available responses. And so in a moment like this, we find ourselves in need of wisdom. Wisdom that can come from a variety of places, from friends and colleagues, from teachers, from leaders we respect. And as Jews, we can also look to Torah. And I do think that there is a lesson in this week's Torah portion that can speak to this moment. Anyone who has spent time studying the book of Numbers may notice that throughout the book, there is a repetitive cycle of events, and that this cycle has four main parts. First, the Israelites sin against God, either with faithless verbal complaints, active rebellion against Moses and Aaron, egregious violations of God's commandments, or some combination of the three. Second, God punishes and or threatens to punish the Israelites, sometimes to the point of threatening to wipe them all out, starting over with Moses. Third, there is some combination of the Israelites crying out for mercy and repenting, and Moses interceding on their behalf, often with a great deal of chutzpah. And fourth, God relents, renounces punishment, in whole or in part, and remains in relationship with the Israelites, admittedly, usually only after the punishment has already wiped out a good portion of them. Rinse and repeat. 7 times in the book of Numbers, we see some version of this cycle. And I am sure that for many of the Israelites, and especially for Moses, Miriam, and Aaron, that cycle might have felt inescapable. And yet, tucked in the middle of those cycles, there is an odd insertion. Here in Parashat Balak, which our community is reading this week, we find a story that has no connection to what occurs before or after it other than the geographical location. It's a fable, a parable, about a wicked king, an invisible angel, a talking donkey, and a sorcerer who is caught between the wicked king's desire to curse and God's power to bless. The story opens, for those who are not familiar, just after the Israelites had defeated 2 neighbors of the kingdom of Moab. Balak, the king of Moab, was worried that his nation might be next, so he sent messengers to Balaam, a famed prophet and sorcerer, and asked him to come and curse the Israelites. God appeared to Balaam that night and instructed him not to curse the people whom God had blessed. Eventually, Balaam went to Moab, and on the way, God sent an angel to block his path. And even though Balaam couldn't see the angel, the donkey that he was riding on could, and she refused to move. In his frustration, Balaam struck the donkey, and miraculously she spoke and chastised him for doing so. God then allowed Balaam to see the angel. The angel spoke with Balaam, again reminding him to only say the words that God would allow him to say. After that conversation, Balaam continued to Moab, where he met with Balak and instructed him to build 7 altars, to offer sacrifices to God. But despite those rituals, Balaam could only say the words that God would allow him to say. And he showered, instead of cursing the Israelites, he showered them with blessings and praises. How can I curse the ones whom God has not cursed? How can I doom them when the Eternal has not doomed them? No harm is in sight for Jacob, no woe in view for Israel. The Eternal, their God, is with them, and their sovereign's acclaim is in their midst. And no matter how angry Balak got, and no matter how many times they tried different ways of making it possible for Balaam to curse the Israelites, only blessings came from his mouth, including that sentence that has become, if it wasn't already, familiar to some of us, Matovu ohalecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael. How good are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling places, O Israel. And at that point, Balak finally gave up on cursing the Israelites and sent Balaam on his way. It's a nice story. I mean, I might have a few critiques, but overall, it's a good parable. So the question is then, what can we learn from it? One thing I find particularly striking about this story is how it plays with ideas of perception and power in ways that are somewhat unique in the Torah. Balak assumes that the Israelites will attack him. He fears losing his life, or maybe just losing his power. And in his insufficiently founded fear, he tries to get someone to curse his perceived enemy. An act which, by the way, was typically a precursor for military violence in the ancient Near East. They would send people to curse their enemy as a way of weakening them before attacking them physically. Balaam, similarly, makes an assumption when his path to Moab is blocked. And based on that assumption and his inability to see the true nature of the obstacle, he misdirected his anger, also with an act of violence. Later, Balak, still motivated by fear of the Israelites, tried multiple times to get Balaam to curse them, having him try it from different locations and with different rituals, and getting angry each time those efforts failed. In his fear and anger, he could not accept the words from God that Balaam had transmitted to him, that this was a people to be blessed, not cursed. Some might see one lesson of this story to be found in the powerlessness of Balaam and Balak, and the inevitability of God's blessing, and they would not be entirely wrong, but I think we can go a little deeper. When we allow our actions to be based solely on fear and anger, at the exclusion of courage and hope, and on assumptions instead of reality, that is when we lose our power. So when we are afraid of a host of unknown potential threats, will we have the patience to base our actions on facts instead of assumptions? When the path ahead is blocked by obstacles that are beyond our sight or understanding, will we be open to new perspectives, even if they come from unexpected or marginalized sources? If the obstacles themselves have something to teach us, will we have the wisdom to learn from them? If those with influence and bad intent try to make us see the worst in those who are different from us, will we instead be able to see through differences and find something in the other that is worth blessing? When we ourselves are at risk of being consumed by fear or despair, will we instead be able to find sources of courage and hope? And if there is wickedness or cruelty that threatens our neighbor, will we have the will to speak and act on their behalf? I pray that the answer to all of these questions is yes, that we are able to find sources of spiritual nourishment and rest when we need it, and that we are able to act constructively on behalf of our ideals and convictions. Ken Yehi Ratzon. May this be God's will. Shabbat Shalom. We now turn our thoughts to those who are in need of healing and wholeness, offering prayers and sending our thoughts and our strength to them. Our community has a healing list with over 60 names on it. Since we have started live streaming our worship publicly, we have not shared that list out loud in this space, at least not into a microphone, but they know that we are thinking about them. And there may be others who are here in this room who have those you are thinking of who could use some kind of wholeness of body, of mind, or of spirit. And so I would encourage anybody who would like to share a name out loud or in your heart. And then in a moment, we'll join together on page 371 and offer them a prayer for healing. If there are any names. Is there anybody else that we should be thinking of? Although it is just one incident among many, I am thinking of those who survived the recent shooting in Highland Park, who will have to deal with the trauma and find ways to heal. There may be others. Whether we have said their names out loud or in our hearts, we join together on page 371 and offer them a prayer of healing. Mi sheberach avotenu mikor habracha leimotenu. May the source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Mi sheberach imotenu mikor habracha lavo Eloheinu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. In this moment where we are offering prayers on behalf of the community, it seems particularly fitting and important in this moment to offer a prayer for our country. There is a prayer for our country in our Siddur, but I would like to turn our attention to our Shabbat program. I have to say, I did not plan this. This prayer for our country was written by Rabbi Ayelet Cohen, a former rabbi at Congregation Beit Simchat Torah in New York, and there are a couple of people here in the room who have connections to that community, and that was not by design. But this is a prayer that I think is needed in this moment, and so I'd actually invite us all to read it together on page 4 of the Shabbat program. Our God and God of our ancestors, bless this country and all who dwell within it. Help us to experience the blessings of our lives and circumstances, to be vigilant, compassionate, and brave. Strengthen us when we are afraid. Help us to channel our anger so that it motivates us to action. Help us to feel our fear so that we do not become numb. Help us to be generous with others so that we raise each other up. Help us to be humble in our fear, knowing that as vulnerable as we feel, there are those at greater risk, and that it is our holy work to stand with them. Help us to taste the sweetness of liberty, to not take for granted the freedoms won in generations past or in recent days, to heal and nourish our democracy, that it may be like a tree planted by the water, whose roots reach down to the stream. It need not fear the drought when it comes. Its leaves are always green. Amen. Sanctifying this moment of Shabbat, we'll offer Kiddush, which we can find way back on page 123. Do this without spilling anything or... Okay, hold on. It's just a matter of going slowly. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kodsho, be'ahava uvratzon hinchelanu, zikaron lemaaseh v'reishit, ki hu yom techila lemikrae kodesh, zeicher litziat Mitzrayim, kivanu v'acharta, ve'otanu kidashta mikol hamim, ve'shabbat kodshecha be'ahava uvratzon hinchaltanu. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh HaShabbat. we will move toward the conclusion of our service with Aleinu L'Shabeach, all the way ahead on page 586. Once we are all there, we will rise as we are able. Page 586 at the top. Aleinu l'shabeach la'adon hakol, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסד ארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו בגובהי מרומים, הוא אלוהינו אין עוד. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. Excuse me. You may be seated. And we'll read together at the top of page 589. Let the time not be distant, O God, when all shall turn to you in love, when corruption and evil shall give way to integrity and goodness, when superstition shall no longer enslave the mind, nor idolatry blind the eye. O may all created in your image become one in spirit and one in friendship, forever united in your service. Then shall your realm be established on earth, and the word of your prophet fulfilled. Adonai will reign forever and ever. On page 591, Kakatu b'toratecha Adonai yimloch leolam va'ed. V'ne'emar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol ha'aretz bayom ha'hu bayom ha'hu yeh Adonai echad u'shemo echad. Zecher tzadik livracha, may the memory of the righteous be a blessing. We call to our minds at this moment those who are no longer with us in body, but are certainly with us in spirit, those who have passed away in recent days, or those whose Yartzeiten, whose anniversaries of passing we observe on this Shabbat, or anybody else whose memory we are holding in our hearts at this moment. In our congregation, we are observing and remembering the recent passings of Jillian Flory Landweber, daughter-in-law of Larry and Jean Landweber, wife of Michael Landweber, mother of Allison and Maya Landweber, and the recent passing of Dr. Joel Alexander Peterson, husband of Carlene Peterson, brother of Paul Peterson, father of Kyle Peterson, Trent Peterson, and Corey Peterson. To their names, we connect the names of all of those who have touched our lives, and especially, again, the Yartzeit and the anniversaries of passing that we observe on this Shabbat, including before listing the names, I want to offer that if you are here and you are observing a Yartzeit and we call the name of your loved one, you are invited, if you would like, to rise. And we will then, in a moment, join you as a community. We are this week observing the Yartzeiten of Leo Berman, Louis Kaufman, Philip M. Cohen, Harold Farkas, Beatrice Goldberg, Lillian Goldman, Herman B. Halperin, Max H. Halperin, Isabel S. Juster, Harry Cantor, Jenya Gladniskaya, Rose Krinsky, Julia Haber Lakritz, Harry R. Levy, Connie Mansfield, David Hirschfeld Margulis, Nathan Pizer, Norothy Rivitz, Pauline Rosenberg, Lou Ross, Judith Schuster, Jacqueline Siegel, Esther Shabbat, Shirley Sweet, Clara Sweet, Sarah Ward, Marika Winheld, Jerome Wolins, Betty Zimmerman. And though there are so many names that we could be referring to when it comes to recent acts of violence, I want to raise the names of those 7 who died in the recent shooting in Highland Park, some of whom have had personal connections to members of our community, including Catherine Goldstein, Irina McCarthy, Kevin McCarthy, Stephen Strauss, Jackie Sondheim, Nicholas Toledo Zaragoza, and Eduardo Uvaldo. If there's anybody else in the community here, either here in the room with us or joining us online, and you would like to share a name to our list of memory, you are invited to do so. Is there anybody else we should be remembering in this moment? Zichronam livracha, may their memories be for a blessing. Together we will rise as a community and offer the words of Mourner's Kaddish, which you can find on page 598. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabba, be'alma di v'ra chirutech ve'amlich malchutech, b'chayichon uvyomechon uv'chaye dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uvizman kariv ve'imru amen. Yehei shemech rabba mevarach le'alam ul almei almaya. Yitbarach ve'yishtabach ve'yitpa'ar ve'yitromam ve'yitnaseh. Ve'yithadar ve'yit'aleh ve'yithalal shemech tekudsha barichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma ve'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel ve'imru amen. Zichronam livracha, you may be seated. A few announcements before we conclude the service. Our service will be ending in a moment, and when it does, you are welcome to join us out in our community court for a sweet Oneg Shabbat. Either if you would like to stay here in our community court and have some of the Oneg that is graciously sponsored by the Temple Beth El Sisterhood, or if you need to head out more quickly, I believe that we have cookies from Just Bakery that are available for people to take on your way out the door. We are so grateful to be able to have a relationship with Just Bakery that's connected with Just Dane and does some really great work on helping those who have been recently incarcerated, helping them reintegrate into society, preventing recidivism, and a number of other very worthy endeavors. Coming up in our calendar, looking ahead to the next young person in our community to become B'nai Mitzvah is a little bit of a ways away. On Saturday, August 6th, we'll be inviting Meredith Peer, the daughter of Reagan Shapiro and Lee Peer, to come to our bima as a bat mitzvah. That will be happening again Saturday, August 6th at 10:30 a.m. here in our sanctuary. For those who are here in this space, we are very grateful that you are wearing masks properly over your nose and mouth, for providing proof of vaccination for those who, especially who are here for the first time this evening, for engaging with and participating in our contact tracing. If you if you, within 5 days of being here, you find that you have tested positive for COVID, we encourage you to reach out to our executive director and let her know, so that we can let those who were present here know that they were potentially exposed, and so that they can make the best decision for themselves, their health, and their family. As always, we appreciate everything that you all do to help us keep one another safe. This Shabbat, tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., we will have Torah study, which is now hybrid. So you can be either here in person or connecting remotely via Zoom. It will be led by Kendra Sager. Next week, our Shabbat services, Friday at 7:30 p.m., we will have a Shabbat service featuring a guest artist, Galit Dardashti, who is going to be earlier in the week offering a lecture at UW, and will be joining us at various moments throughout Shabbat as an artist in residence, including co-leading Shabbat worship with me and Rabbi Beich on Friday evening, offering a lecture on Saturday afternoon on Middle Eastern and North African piyutim, which are poetic songs. And then at 6:30 p.m. with me co-leading a Havdalah with some additional music. Also on Saturday, July 16th at 9 a.m., we will, of course, have Torah study, still hybrid, being led by Steve Olson. Is there anybody else here in this space who has an announcement that I am forgetting and not thinking of? Seeing none. I will also mention that I am still offering a trope class on Torah chanting this summer. If you have not already engaged with it, it is not too late. If you have interest in it, please feel free to reach out to me. And if it doesn't work for you this summer, there will be additional opportunities for learning about Torah chanting in the coming year. To close our service this evening, hold on, that was a phone. Wanted to make sure it wasn't something to be broken. It did. I'll get it later. I would love to actually close with how we opened. Turning to page 630 and offering those words of Ma Tovu that may have a new resonance for us in this moment. So page 630, and again, we'll just offer the refrain and the final verse, thinking about all the ways, not only that our prayer can come to God at a favorable time, but the ways that going forward from here that we can be our prayer, that we can live the words that we speak, find ways of acting on our values and convictions, and finding those sources of hope and courage. Page 630. Ma Tovu. Ma Tovu, Ohalecha Yaakov, Ohalecha Yaakov, Mishkenotecha Yisrael. Ma Tovu, Ohalecha Yaakov, Ohalecha Yaakov, Mishkenotecha Yisrael. Va'ani berot chastecha avo ve'tech. I'm in the wrong place. Va'ani. Let's go back to Va'ani tefilati. Va'ani tefilati lecha Adonai et ratzon Elohim berov chastecha aneni be'emet ishecha atovu halecha Yaakov ohalecha Yaakov ishkenotecha Yisrael atovu ohalecha Yaakov ohalecha Yaakov ishkenotecha Yisrael. Shabbat Shalom, friends.